Mr. President, when the Senate begins its debate, as it's been doing today on the War Powers Act, and considering this resolution, we are considering whether to do our duty to the Constitution. The debate over war powers is bigger than any one senator, bigger than any one president, and bigger than any political party. The debate over war powers is a fundamental constitutional debate. And the Constitution and our founding fathers were clear. The power to declare war lies in the legislature. Madison put it this way: the executive is the branch most prone to war. Therefore, the Constitution, with studied care, vested that power, the power to declare war, in the legislature. Yet we have increasingly deferred and delegated the war powers back to the executive. We have abdicated our role as the body that should be deciding with the people when to go to war. While the president may have the power to repel an attack, Congress has done little to stop increasingly bold arguments that everything is in response to an imminent attack. I'll never forget President Obama coming to speak to the Republican caucus a few years ago, and he said, well, they were under imminent attack, and we were like, who? In the Libyan war. And he said, well, Benghazi. And it's like, for goodness sakes, we thought imminent attack was of America, not of a foreign city. That's how far afield we've come, that a president would come to us and say, I can do whatever I want if there's an imminent attack of a foreign city. How ludicrous. But given Congress's inaction, it should come as no surprise that administration lawyers increasingly argue that everything is imminent and that statutes limiting their authority actually don't limit their authority, that the statutes actually say they can do whatever they want. Presidents actually argue that Article 2 of the Constitution, this is what gives the president power. Article 1 is the congressional power. Article 2 is the president. They argue that the Article 2 section of the Constitution lets the president do anything he wishes, he or she wishes, that there are no limits on presidential authority. That is absurd. Under President Obama, we droned hundreds of people in Pakistan. We bombed Libya to help defeat Gaddafi. We put military personnel in dozens and dozens of countries around the world, fighting militants and regional thugs here and there. But with each passing year, it had less and less to do with 9/11. It's hard to explain to someone how a goat herder in Mali has anything to do with the attacks of 9/11. And yet every president comes back to us and says, well, you voted for this proclamation in 2001, and it gives me the power to do whatever I want, wherever I want. In our republic, if we are going to go to war, the Constitution says you must come to Congress, not for consultation, but for permission. Today's vote is not a vote for or against the current president. Today's vote is for or against the Constitution. Either you believe that war requires the permission of Congress or you don't. Why is this vote necessary? Because we live in a topsy-turvy world where presidents now argue that their war power is absolute. Don't talk to me, I'll do what I want. But the Constitution envisioned that we did not ever want one person to decide when we went to war. Presidents now argue that a decades-old authorization of force against a long-deceased autocrat, Saddam Hussein, is still valid and applies to an Iranian general, and that is absurd. That is insulting to the people, it's insulting to the Constitution, and it shouldn't be. You cannot argue that the Constitution gives the president unlimited power and say, oh, well, if that doesn't work, I'm also arguing that in 2002, Congress voted to go to war with Saddam Hussein, and that gives me the power to kill an Iranian general. Presidents have also argued that bombing is not war. They argue somehow that bombs are not war and that there's a certain amount of troops. Well, maybe 100 soldiers aren't troops, maybe 1,000. What does it take to be war? They argue sometimes that we're not in hostilities when we're dropping bombs everywhere around a country. They sometimes argue that battles are kinetic action and not really war. We have been at war too long in too many places. It's time to bring our soldiers home. This week I joined the president to honor 2 of our soldiers who were killed in action. I stopped with the president at Dover Air Force Base, and let me tell you, it was a sad and somber memorial for two of our nation's heroes. But people need to think about this. This isn't a chess game. This isn't a geopolitical chess game where we're just moving troops here and there, and they're somehow represented by symbols on a big map or a board. This is about people. It's about our young people of our country, and they deserve better. Our soldiers deserve to know what they are fighting for. Our soldiers deserve to know what the mission is. Our soldiers deserve to know if we're making progress. They deserve to be told the truth. America's longest war in Afghanistan is in its 20th year. We now have kids fighting who weren't even born when the war began. My committee this week held a hearing to discuss the Afghan papers that reveal that the highest-ranking officials in our military and in our government and in our State Department have known for many years that the Afghan war lacks a real mission, that it lacks a real national security rationale. My vote today is not simply about Iran or the killing of Soleimani. My vote today is about the constitutional requirement that Congress must declare war. This vote should be 100-0. It's a vote for or against the Constitution. This is about acknowledging the Constitution says no one man, no one woman can take a nation to war. Many members will quietly acknowledge that the separation of powers assigned Congress the power to declare war, but when push comes to shove, many senators are afraid to appear to oppose a president of their own party. For me, this debate is not about party. I have supported the constitutional mandate that Congress must declare war under both Democrat and Republican presidents, and I will continue. For me, this debate is not a dry and esoteric or meaningless debate. It is a debate about life and death. It is a debate that more than any other debate embodies our commitment to our soldiers. It is a debate that strikes at the heart of our duty to do everything possible to protect human life. Today's vote is historic in that the majority of the House and the Senate will now be on record affirming Congress's power over issues of war. Even at the height of the Vietnam War, the height of America's probably most unpopular war, congressional majorities did not stand up and assert their constitutional prerogative. Today, we are doing that. That's a step forward. In the aftermath of the most partisan impeachment in our history, today, though, marks a high watermark for the bipartisan assertion of the separation of powers. For me, it will have all been worthwhile when I see our troops returning home to their families safe and sound. For me, it will all be worthwhile when we finally end the Afghan war, when we finally end the Iraq war, when we finally end the wars in Yemen and throughout Africa. When that day comes, I look forward to standing arm in arm across the political divide to welcome our brave soldiers home. Until that day, I will continue to fight for the truth that great nations don't fight perpetual wars.